Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
Hi, I'm Ben Alexander, the creator of Ironheart at Parable Games.
Yes, and that's what we're going to talk about today Ironheart, which is a very different type of product that I was expecting from Parable Games. When they first approached me with the press release for Ironheart, I expected, oh, maybe it's another horror game, but this is totally different direction. Even gameplay, this is a solo play. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah, so it's a solo game that uses a different dice system than Shiver, which is our kind of mainline game, and tonally and everything very, very different from our previous horror releases.
Okay, so Ironheart, it looks like it's very inspired by the Iron Giant. Tell us about this. Is that where you're inspired from? Is this more anime inspired? What is this project exactly?
Yeah, so Ironheart as a game, it's a solo mech role playing game where you play as a pilot and their giant robot companion in a post war galaxy, just sort of wandering around, and it's relatively peaceful. Occasionally, you'll fight mercenaries and things like that, but it's generally a more peaceful setting than you might be used to in mech games or mech media in general. In terms of the inspirations for it, anime is probably like the bigger one there. Like Iron Giant is certainly an inspiration there, but it's more inspired by things like Vision of Escaflowne, some of the Gundam series. And then other things like the Mass Effect series and Twilight Imperium. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge of all different sci-fi media.
Okay, is this your first work?
Yeah, so prior to this, I'm probably best known as the, well, if I'm known at all, I'm the artist for Shiver, which is the horror role playing game from Parable Games. And this is my first kind of foray into writing and creating a game myself. So, yes, this is my my first attempt.
This is your own role playing game, and you could have done any topic. You could have done D&D or fantasy or something like that. Something you could do something more mainstream or even something more indie. But you chose this as your first project. If I may ask, why this first? What is it about this that you felt like this had to be your first thing?
Yeah, so I started working on this in 2022, I think, when at the time I was like the main thing I was working on was the Shiver double feature series. So like Shiver Slasher, Shiver Blockbuster, two of our expansions for that settings, for that system. And Ironheart just came out of a lot of media I was consuming at the time, a lot of kind of feelings I was having. It was still like we were still in the pandemic in a big way. There was a lot of horrible stuff going on. So I wanted to create something that was more optimistic, like maybe a bit more utopian as a setting. And also I just got really into anime over over the lockdown. So I was watching a lot of mecha anime and playing the Mass Effect trilogy again, and got into Twilight Imperium. So it's kind of just a collision course of all those things in kind of one place, I suppose.
And if I may ask, why a solo play?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons for this. Firstly, another thing is I got more into solo role playing when I was around the time when this started in development. Another reason it's really easy to playtest. To be honest, you just have yourself to look out for, and I'm generally as a person quite introverted. I think the idea of like having a game that was like something that I'd like to play. To be honest, that's kind of where it came from. And one of the big inspirations for it was this wonderful game called Colostal. I don't know if you've heard of that one by Nick Angel. It's a solo card based role playing game where the setting is a castle that's so big it has continents and oceans inside of it, and you fight giant walking castles. And it's got a really lovely art style. So part of it was kind of that was kind of a jumping off point for me, and I was like, wow, this works, and I feel like I could do something like that.
So let's talk about the BackerKit
Yes.
project that's currently going on for this. It looks like there's a couple of things available. Would you like to talk about the campaign so far?
Yeah, sure thing. So at the time of recording, the campaign's going really well. I think we're just under coming up to £40,000 on it, which is nice to see. But in terms of the offer of the backer kit, we've got a few kind of products and levels that we offer. So we've got the kind of the first one is the pilot's handbook, which is like the core rule book, which is everything you need to play the game. So that's a hardback A5. Then we've got Ironheart Remembrance, which is an expansion to that, which is set in a very specific part of this the galaxy, the Astral Union, which is the setting for the story. Um, then we've got a journal that you can use. The game is designed to be a journaling game. We've got a set of bespoke dice for this, which come in three colours. And then on top of that, we've got the Mech's Toolkit, which is a collection of different bits and pieces that are like useful for playing. So we've got a tear out character sheets, dice rolling tray, and then a few in-universe corporate business cards for the corporations in within the setting, as well as a kind of corporate charter with background information on all of those.
And I'm looking at your page right now, and there's like these maps, uh, great looking dice, cards, all sorts of really interesting things. If I may ask, how long was the process of all this planning? Was it a very difficult process to put this all together?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a strange one because this started out as something I was doing in my spare time, and originally under a different title as well. I think either at the end of last year or the beginning of first year, I kind of pitched it to Charlie and Barney, the brothers who run Parable Games, and they were very enthusiastic about it. The idea was we were originally going to release this through our Patreon, and then it kind of grew over time, and we realised it was maybe at a point where it could be crowdfunded and released as a full product. And that only began a few months ago. So we kind of had a lot of discussions and meetings about what we were actually going to offer on the crowdfunding site on BackerKit. So it evolved from one book into two books, and then all the extra bits on the side. But no, it wasn't a particularly difficult process. It was more just kind of focusing it all down into what we thought the best things would be, I suppose.
Hmm. I want to talk to you about the story, but first, the artwork for this is so eye catching, and it's so different from your work in Shiver. Shiver is very like you can you can pick it out from afar because the art style is so specific for the Shiver line, the Shiver role playing game. But Ironheart, it's so different from it. Honestly, if you told me someone else made this, I would believe it because it looks so different art wise. I mean, everything from the use of colors, um, the just the style of it in general. Can you share with us like some of your thoughts behind the art direction in this project?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, it's the kind of the difference from Shiver is a very, very intentional thing. Like this is a very different kind of game. It's a very different story, a very different tone, and a lot of it kind of came from my I don't know. I just like I really like them. I guess one through line with this and Shiver is there's maybe a tendency towards like the more minimal style of artwork. Like in Shiver, we've got very heavy blacks and quite a limited color palette, whereas in here the interior art is just black and one color. But yeah, so the art's kind of inspired by a few things, by like a few artists that I really like. There's an amazing artist called Hannah Templar who did some of the artwork for Thirsty Sword Lesbians. She's got a book called Cosmonites, which I love. She was a big inspiration for the art style, just that kind of like more expressive, kind of anime inspired, like kind of adventure stuff. And yeah, on top of that, I mentioned like anime a lot for this because it's a big inspiration for the project. But Studio Trigger, who are like quite a big anime production house, they've got a very specific art style which feeds into this as well. Um, yeah, I just wanted it to be colourful and expressive and quite hopeful, but at the same time, because it's mechs, because it's giant robots, I didn't want it to feel sterile either. I didn't want it to feel cold or necessarily threatening. Like one of the kind of tonal reference points for this is Big Hero 6, the Disney film, and Baymax, the big like bubble robot thing. I wanted it to feel like your mech is Baymax. I want you to feel like you're piloting Baymax in that, and that's why that's why all the robots are so like big and round, like kind of gentle looking. Yeah.
Hmm. So let's talk about the main story of Ironheart. What can you tell us?
Sure thing. So Ironheart is set in. So the setting is called the Astral Union, which is a kind of big interstellar conglomeration federation of different species that now exist peacefully. Um, and it is set 70 years after a big cataclysmic war, which is like an existential threat to all life as we know it, from these kind of extraterrestrial aliens known as the Nephilim. Um, the the Astral Union was able to fight those off, and in the years since has become increasingly kind of like democratic and peaceful and just a more pleasant place to live in. So where the time where our mech and our pilot start their story, um, it's in a time where life is generally quite good. Although there are still problems, the different kind of societies that make up the Astral Union all have their own kind of like cultural historical baggage. Um, you can play a pilot from any one of those. So you could play as like an Ervon, who's like a giant space bear, or the Varsis, who are like a lizard person, or like or humans who we call Apollonians in this setting. And there's still problems and there's still reasons why people might want to leave the kind of mainstream core of the Astral Union. And Ironheart is generally set around the edges of that. So in these kind of new frontier worlds where people are setting up new communities, or where things are a bit more lawless. So there's a bit of a Wild West energy there.
What I love about solo play is that it's almost like in a way of like, well, sort of like fan fiction a little bit. You're taking this story this beginning story that you set up, and then people create these interesting journeys with what you set up and put together. And I love hearing from other players like what they've done and where they've gone since then. If I may ask, when you tried this out, where did you go? How did your adventures end up?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, on the BackerKit page, we've actually got a video of me playing through part of an adventure now. But yeah, it's generally a lot of it. Kind of the crux of it, like revolves around people, you helping people, just going around, you kind of like you and your mech. Exploring things and kind of growing together, but it was stuff like going around and fighting off like mercenaries attacking like a small mining town and then going somewhere else, and like helping to fix a dam that had been like partially destroyed, and like there'd been flooding and things like that, and then kind of yeah, that's it. It's a weird one. Like you've got all this. You do ultimately have that freedom to it, and a lot of solo role playing games is giving you those prompts to kind of make the story what you want with it. But we also, in Ironheart, we have a thing called the story circuit, which is a narrative device that lets you play through these kind of pre-written stories in a way that works for you. You can do part of them, or you can do all of them. Or you can do all parts of that story circuit and come to a kind of finale there. But yeah, so yeah, it's just quite open, I think.
And I noticed what's really interesting. Usually, other creators when they make a book, usually it's just one book, but you have the pilot's handbook, and you also have remembrance.
Hmm.
I know you already sort of mentioned both in your previous answers. Would you mind kind of explaining the differences between these two books?
Yeah, sure thing. So the pilot's handbook is basically the core system of everything you need in the game. So it's character creation, generally like exploration throughout the world, and enemy types you'll encounter, different encounters, and then at the back of that we've got a selection of different disparate stories that aren't related to each other that you can play through. So everything you need to play is in that one book. Remembrance is an expansion to that book. So you need the core book to use this, but it's set in a specific part of the Astral Union space. So rather than different story circuits that are unrelated, this is kind of like a more grand narrative. Um, and it also introduces a couple of new kind of things in the lore. So the setting of this is on one of the it's in a part of space which was one of the historical battlegrounds from 70 years ago. And there's two kind of new groups that are there that you can play as. So there's the Rakain, who are like I guess, the spider people, inspired by the book Children of Time, and they have big spider mechs with like 8 legs. And there's the Ironborn, who are essentially human-sized mechs who have become self-aware, and you can play as one of them. So they'll kind of open up new kind of narrative possibilities for those.
Let's talk a little bit about the rules for this exactly. You mentioned that this is different from what Shiver offers currently from their rule system. So how do the rules work in this game?
Yeah, so I'd say it's fairly rules light, or in some circumstances. So most kind of dice rolls in the game, you'll all use as a d6, and on a 4 plus, you are successful in what you want to do. So that could be convincing people of things, or having your mech lift a collapsing building up, and you have modifiers to those. But the general gameplay loop revolves around you. You land on a planet with in a settlement, and we have lots of tables there that you roll, and you randomly generate different things there. So you randomly generate the size of a settlement, how many different buildings are there, and then when you set out on your adventure, you roll on the journeying between locations. You roll for an encounter table. You see what kind of encounter it is, and then you see which encounter on the relevant table it is. Um, then, when it comes to combat, it's quite simple. Effectively, your character has a set number of attacks that they split up each turn between melee and ranged attacks. Um, and outside of that, you have a special ability called Engaging the Ion Core, which are kind of effectively like super moves that you can do in or out of combat that kind of give you big bonuses. And that kind of ties into the lore, the idea there being that your pilot and your mech kind of like synchronize their minds together and almost like become one person in those moments of stress. And it's just a way of keeping things moving quite nice. So, for example, you can pass a check you would have failed otherwise, or you can make extra attacks in combat, or you can heal yourself. That sort of thing.
If I may ask, there's there's this trope. I think originally might have been like a child and their pet or their dog, um, and it's sort of morphed in modern times to become a child and their robot. And as we mentioned, we've seen these things in anime, Iron Giant. Gundam, things like that, where it's always a human interacting with an artificial creature of some sort.
Hmm.
What do you think it is about this mythology that seems to be um, endearing to us to this day?
Hmm.
Usually, those type of stories tend to be very emotional about some sort of connection. You think that's part of it?
Yeah, definitely. I know there's that kind of tradition, especially in like some mecha animes, where the kind of the metaphor, the suggestion there is a lot of it's to do with like growth and like in things like Evangelion, it's pretty explicitly about puberty and like it's you've got a child, but then you've got this like other larger body that they're learning to use, and what that kind of suggests about them or what they can do in the world. So I think that I know that's one angle that it's been taken. Um, but yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose it's just like it's kind of a universal thing about how we connect with the other. I suppose with another being, and in when we talk about robots as well, they can be incredibly naive. So you have a child who's growing, who is then also kind of taking this, teaching this other thing to kind of grow with them. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a very good answer, but that's one that I could think a lot about and try and come up with with something more profound.
Are there any themes, or do you hope that there's certain messages that players get or understand when they're playing this?
Yeah, I suppose there's kind of like a through line to do with memory in this. Like, so in the lore, um, a lot of the mechs that we use in the world are actually repurposed former military machines that are from that conflict 70 years ago and have been repurposed for civilian life. So I think there's something about there, like about as you go through the game, you kind of unlock your mech's memories and see what their experiences have been. So I think there's a lot about memory, and kind of, I suppose, like broadly, you could say that's about overcoming trauma, things like that. As well as I guess my kind of more kind of social political inclinations go, there's a lot of stuff that's quite anti-corporate in this. A lot of the big baddies are like large kind of multi-stellar corporations that are relying on mineral exploitation, exploitation of labor, and that comes into it as well when you realize that the mechs in this universe are generally, most vehicles are mechs. So instead of a bus, you'd have a giant mech with like six legs that people would sit in, and rather than cranes, you'd have large mechs. So what does it do when you have what are essentially machines that are also can think? What does that? What does that? Or in a universe where you have planned obsolescence, but the things that you have that can be made obsolete are essentially people. So there is like it's generally quite it is quite a light game, but there are kind of like those nuggets of things in there that are quite can get quite serious if you look into them.
Mm. So, what is next for you? Are you working on maybe a new Shiver book? Are you working on a different project whatsoever? What is next for you?
Oh, so we're always working on new stuff. So I'm working on Ironheart. I'm working on, there's some Shiver stuff that, so we every month we release Shiver things through our Patreon. So there's always new Shiver things there. Um, and yeah, there's definitely a few things that I can't talk about. There's another little solo game that I've designed, which is potentially coming out at the end of this month on our Patreon as well. So, but yeah, no, I think I've always got new ideas for things. So, but yeah, mainly Shiver, mainly Ironheart for now.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So one last question, a fun question. Um, if you had if you found a robot companion, uh, what would you name it? If it asked you to name it.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I guess it depends what it what it looked like. So to come back to Ironheart, you know, you can have the robots that kind of are designed to look like the different alien species in it. So for the Varsis, who are like the alien people, they're like the reptile alien people. The Varsis have like they've got tails and scales, but they've also got like feathered crests. So the robots have tails and like sort of abstracted crests around their heads. The Monal, who the cat people, have like little cat ears on their robots and like double jointed legs. So I don't know. My the mech in the last playthrough that I went through was a Varsis mech, and I called it Coppertail because I imagine just this big kind of like yeah, this big kind of lizard robot. How
Mm.
about you? Have you got any thoughts?
If I had a companion, hopefully, without looking at your book, so I'm not sure about the rules and everything, but yeah, probably like Transformer would be cool. Do you? I don't
Yeah.
know. There was in Transformers the movie back the 1987 movie.
Hmm.
There was this one scene where the young boy Daniel had like the skateboard. He was riding with it with a hot rod, and I always thought that that's too bad a skateboard wasn't a transformer. So I would like something like that, something that I could travel with, like some
Mm.
sort of it could be a car or a skateboard, but it's also a robot companion. I think that'd be cool. Something I could we could something that we could travel together. A means of something like that.
No,
Uh,
that'd be
and
yeah, very cool.
and the name, what name? What do I give it? Blue Streak, which is a name I used for my first robot character that I ever made for my comic book when I was in fourth grade.
Oh, awesome.
I'm surprised I still remember that.
Oh, good job.
Yes. Any last words before we wrap up? Is there anything about this project that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
So one thing is, if you go onto the BackerKit page, you can download the Quick Start Guide now, which is should give you a really good impression of what the game's all about. It's 48 pages long. It's got a lot of character creation options, and it has a couple of stories at the end of it that you can play through. So that'd be my kind of yeah, where I'd point people to.
Okay, and this is currently right now on BackerKit. I'll put a link in the description below. When does the BackerKit end?
The back kit ends, I believe, on I think it's the 15th or 16th of August. I'll have to double check that.
Okay. All right, excellent. Yeah, so I'll put that information and the links in the description below. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about Ironheart. This sounds really fantastic. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.